The Galactic Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by any species in known space. It floated in the darkness between stars, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold representatives from over 200 worlds. Every cycle, diplomats and leaders gathered here to discuss the future of civilization itself. Wars had been prevented in this hall. Peace treaties had been signed. The fate of entire species had been decided by votes cast in these chambers. Ambassador Kethvarin of the Veloci Collective had served in this hall for nearly 50 years. He was old by the standards of his people, his 4 eyes growing dim, his scaled skin losing its shine. But his mind remained sharp, and his reputation as a fair negotiator made him respected across the galaxy. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched young species take their first steps into the cosmic community. He had witnessed moments of great triumph and terrible tragedy. But in all his years of service, one thing had never changed. One mystery had never been solved. The seat designated for Earth remained empty. It sat in the front row of the assembly, positioned between 2 of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. The chair was simple compared to the elaborate thrones preferred by other species. Just metal and dark fabric, size for a creature of moderate height with 2 arms and 2 legs. A small plaque on the armrest identified it as belonging to the human delegation. No human had ever sat in it. No human had ever entered this hall. Kethvarin found himself staring at the chair again as the current session dragged on. A dispute about mining rights in some distant system. The same arguments he had heard 1,000 times before. His attention wandered, as it always did, to that empty seat. His colleague noticed. Counselor Yena was an insectoid being with 6 legs and compound eyes that missed nothing. She leaned close and made a clicking sound that her translator converted to speech. "You are looking at the Earth chair again," she said. "This is becoming a habit." "I was merely thinking," Kethvarin replied. "About what?" "There is nothing to think about. The humans declined membership. They prefer isolation. It happens sometimes." But Kethvarin knew it was not that simple. He had read reports that were not meant for ordinary diplomats. He had seen fragments of information that suggested something far more disturbing than simple isolation. The founding council of the Assembly had sent delegation after delegation to Earth over the centuries. 12 official missions. Each one had returned with the same answer. No, not no thank you. Not perhaps later. Just no. Firm and absolute, and completely without explanation. The session ended and Kethvarin made his way through the crowded corridors of the station. Beings of every shape and size moved around him. Creatures that breathed methane walked beside those that breathed oxygen. Silicon-based life forms conversed with carbon-based ones. The diversity of the galaxy was on full display. Hundreds of species working together despite their differences. All except one. He found High Arbiter Zahn in the historical archives, a vast library that contained records from every member world. Zahn was ancient even by the standards of the long-lived Kralith. His crystalline body had grown cloudy with age, and he moved slowly, but his memory was legendary. If anyone knew the truth about Earth, it would be him. "I wish to see the Earth files," Kethvarin said. Zahn went completely still. The Kralith did this when they felt threatened. Their silicon bodies became indistinguishable from ordinary stone. It was a survival mechanism from their primitive past, and seeing it now sent a chill through Kethvarin. "There are no Earth files worth seeing," Zahn said finally. "Then there should be no harm in showing them to me." The ancient being was silent for a long moment. Then he moved close, his crystalline face catching the light in strange patterns. "Go home, Ambassador. Forget about the empty chair. Some questions should not be asked. Some answers should not be found." But Kethvarin had not built his career by accepting refusals. That night, he called in every favor he had accumulated over 50 years. He contacted old friends in the intelligence services. He bribed officials who controlled access to restricted information. He pushed and prodded and demanded until finally, in the early hours of the morning, he gained access to files that had been sealed for centuries. What he found was mostly nothing. Page after page of blank documents. Empty reports where information should have been. Someone had systematically erased almost everything related to humanity. But scattered among the emptiness were fragments. Pieces of text that had somehow survived whatever purge had occurred. The first fragment was from a scientific assessment. Recommend immediate end to all contact. Technological capabilities exceed our most extreme estimates. The second was from a military report. They appear to know we are watching. They have known for some time. Suggests they allowed us to detect them deliberately. The third was a personal note from an admiral who had commanded the Galactic Fleet 300 years ago. They let us believe we discovered them. They wanted us to think we were in control. We were never in control. Kethvorn read each fragment with growing horror. The picture they painted was not of a primitive species choosing isolation. It was of something far more powerful than anything the galaxy had encountered. Something that watched from the shadows. Something that had been watching for a very long time. The final fragment was the worst. It was a single sentence, written in unsteady hand, with no attribution or context. In the name of all that is sacred, do not provoke them. Kethvorn closed the files and sat alone in the darkness of his quarters. He understood now why the seat remained empty. It was not because humanity had refused to join the assembly. It was because everyone was too afraid to ask them again. He thought about the empty chair waiting in the assembly hall. He had always assumed it was a symbol of human stubbornness or perhaps human arrogance. Now he realized it was something else entirely. It was a reminder, a warning. Every time the delegates of the galaxy gathered to discuss their petty disputes and territorial squabbles, that chair was there to remind them that something greater was watching. Something that could end their civilization whenever it chose. Something that, for reasons no one understood, had decided to let them live. Kethvorn did not sleep that night. He lay awake until the artificial dawn, thinking about the beings who had built that chair and wondering what they were waiting for. Lieutenant Commander Maya Brooks stood at the observation window of Station Prometheus and watched the stars burn in the endless darkness. She was 34 years old, born on Earth, trained in the most secretive military academy in human history. She was one of 600 personnel assigned to this station, a facility that floated in the void between galaxies where no alien sensor could ever reach. Her job was simple. Watch everything. Report everything. Never be seen. The station received feeds from thousands of hidden observation posts scattered across the galaxy. Tiny devices no larger than a grain of sand, invisible to any technology the alien species had developed. They recorded every conversation in the assembly hall. They monitored every military movement. They tracked every ship, every communication, every secret meeting. Humanity knew everything that happened in the galaxy. And the galaxy knew almost nothing about humanity. Ambassador Kethvorn accessed the restricted archives last night, said analyst Kevin Price from his station behind her. Kevin was young, barely out of training, but his ability to predict behavior was remarkable. He found the fragments we left behind. Good, Maya said without turning from the window. Director Morrison thinks we should intervene. Standard memory modification. Make him forget what he learned. Maya considered this. Memory modification was a common tool in their work. A small device, painless, leaving no trace. The subject would wake up the next morning with a slight headache and no memory of whatever information they had discovered. It had been used thousands of times over the centuries. But something about this situation felt different. Kethvorin is respected, she said finally. He has served the Assembly with honor for 50 years. He asked questions because he genuinely wanted to understand, not because he wanted to cause harm. Does that matter? I think it does. Maya turned to face her colleague. Schedule a meeting with the director. I want to propose an alternative. The meeting took place in a conference room that existed in a dimension the aliens could not perceive. Director Samuel Morrison sat at the head of the table, his gray hair perfectly neat, his expression calm and patient. Around him sat the 12 members of the Earth Oversight Council, the secret body that had guided human policy toward the galaxy for 500 years. Maya presented her case. She argued that Kethvorin posed no threat, that his curiosity was natural and even admirable. She suggested that instead of erasing his memories, they should let him continue his investigation. Let him find exactly what they wanted him to find. And what do we want him to find? Director Morrison asked. Fear, Maya said simply. The same fear that has kept the galaxy peaceful for centuries. Kethvorin will share his discoveries with his colleagues. The rumors will spread. The mystery will deepen. And everyone will be reminded once again that Earth is watching. Counselor Patricia Lane spoke up. She was the oldest member of the council, a woman who remembered the early days of contact. You want to use him as a messenger. I want to use him as a reminder. The Kricks have been growing aggressive lately. The hegemony is expanding. There have been whispers about testing our resolve. A fresh wave of fear would be useful right now. The council debated for nearly an hour before voting. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Kethvorin would be allowed to continue, but he would receive a message. A warning that would remind him exactly who he was dealing with. 3 days later, the ambassador found an image on his private terminal. A star map showing his homeworld, with a single human handprint placed over it. Nothing else. No words. No explanation. The message was clear. We know who you are. We know where you come from. We are always watching. Maya monitored his reaction from Station Prometheus. She watched him stare at the image for a long time. She watched him delete it, then check his security systems, then sit alone in his quarters for hours. When he finally emerged, he looked like a being who had seen something terrible. He never accessed the Earth files again. But Maya felt no satisfaction in her victory. She had joined the intelligence service because she believed in the mission. Humanity had a responsibility to protect the galaxy from itself. The alien species were young, impulsive, violent. Without the fear of Earth to restrain them, they would destroy each other in endless wars. Yet sometimes she wondered if there was a better way. Sometimes she looked at the images of the Assembly Hall, with its hundreds of delegates from dozens of species, and she felt a strange longing. They were out there living, fighting, loving, building civilizations. And humanity was hiding in the shadows, watching from a distance, never truly connecting with any of them. You seem troubled, Kevin said, noticing her mood. Just thinking about the future. What about it? Maya did not answer immediately. She was thinking about the empty chair in the assembly hall. It had been placed there during the first session, 500 years ago, as a gesture of hope. The founders had believed that one day humanity would take its rightful place among the stars. One day the chair would be filled. But 5 centuries had passed, and the chair remained empty. And Maya was beginning to wonder if it would ever be any different. Do you think they will ever be ready? She asked finally. Ready for what? Ready for the truth. Ready to know who we really are and what we can do. Ready to accept us as equals instead of gods. Kevin considered the question carefully. I do not know. The intelligence reports suggest they are making progress. The number of major conflicts has decreased over the past century. Some species are beginning to develop more sophisticated philosophies. but they are still so violent, so afraid of anything different from themselves. We were like that once, Maya said quietly. Long ago, before we learned better. That is true, but we had thousands of years to grow. They have only had a few centuries. Maya nodded and returned her gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Kethforan was sitting in his quarters, haunted by the image of a human hand over his world. He would never know that the hand belonged to beings who wished him no harm. He would never understand that the fear was not a threat but a shield, protecting the galaxy from its own worst impulses. Perhaps one day things would be different. Perhaps one day humanity would step out of the shadows and take its seat among the stars. But not today. Not yet. The galaxy was not ready. And until it was, the chair would remain empty. Dr. Nicole Harper worked in a place that did not officially exist. The Archives Division of Earth Central Intelligence was buried deep beneath mountains that had once been called the Rockies, protected by technology that made the entire facility invisible to any scan. Here, in endless corridors of stored data, humanity kept its true history. The real story of how they had discovered the galaxy and why they had chosen to remain hidden. Nicole had been an archivist for 15 years. Her job was to organize and protect the records that would never be released to the public. Most humans lived their lives without knowing the truth about the galaxy. They went to work, raised families, enjoyed their peaceful existence on Earth and its colonies. They had no idea that their species watched over hundreds of alien civilizations, guiding their development from the shadows. But Nicole knew, and the more she learned, the more she understood why the secret had to be kept. Her colleague Andrew Bell found her working late one evening, surrounded by holographic displays showing documents from centuries past. Andrew was older, experienced, with the calm manner of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Looking at the first contact files again?" he asked, settling into a chair beside her. "I found something interesting." Nicole pulled up a recording dated from the year 2147. This is the original footage from when the Veloci first entered our solar system. Not the version in the public archives. The real one. The recording showed 12 alien warships approaching Earth. They were massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a small moon. The Veloci had come expecting to find a primitive species barely capable of radio signals. Their sensors had detected human broadcasts decades earlier, and they had traveled across the stars to make first contact with what they assumed would be easy prey. What they found instead changed everything. A human appeared on their communication screens. A single man standing on an observation platform that their sensors insisted did not exist. He was calm, relaxed, almost amused. "Welcome to our solar system," he said. "We have been expecting you." The Veloci commander demanded explanations. How did the humans know they were coming? How had they built structures invisible to Veloci technology? What kind of species were they dealing with? The human simply smiled. "You have been broadcasting your location for centuries," he explained. "Every time you used your communication networks, every time you traveled faster than light, you sent out signals that we could detect. We have known about you for a very long time. We have known about all of you." The Veloci commander threatened violence. He ordered his weapons charged and his fleet into attack formation. He was not going to be intimidated by a single primitive creature on a hidden platform. What happened next was not shown in any official record. Nicole had spent years tracking down fragments and piecing them together. The human station had generated some kind of field that reached across the entire solar system. Every system on every Veloci ship simply stopped working. Engines failed. Weapons went dead. Life support continued, but nothing else functioned. The alien fleet drifted helplessly for 3 hours. During that time, Small human vessels approached each ship. They did not attack. They simply observed, scanning everything, recording everything, learning everything about Veloci technology and biology and culture. The aliens could do nothing but watch as their most advanced warships were studied like specimens in a laboratory. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, power was restored. "You may leave now," the human said, his image appearing once more on their screens. "Tell your assembly that Earth is not interested in membership. We prefer to watch from a distance. But we will be paying attention. We will always be paying attention." The Veloci fled. And in the centuries since, every species that attempted to approach Earth had experienced something similar. Not destruction. Never destruction. Just a quiet demonstration of absolute superiority that left no doubt about the balance of power. Nicole closed the recording and sat in silence for a long moment. "They never hurt anyone," she said finally. "In 500 years of contact, humanity has never killed a single alien being." "No," Andrew agreed. "That is not our way. But the fear. We created so much fear." Andrew leaned forward, his expression serious. "The fear is necessary. Let me show you something." He accessed a different set of files, projections, and simulations run by the most advanced computers in human space. They showed what would have happened if humanity had not hidden itself, if they had joined the Galactic Assembly as equals or revealed their true capabilities. The simulations were horrifying. In every scenario, the reveal of human technology led to war. Species fought each other to gain access to human knowledge. Alliances formed and collapsed as factions tried to manipulate the newcomers. In some projections, the galaxy tore itself apart within a century. In others, a coalition formed to attack Earth directly, leading to a conflict that left billions dead. There was no version of events where the truth led to peace. "They are not ready," Andrew said quietly. "They are still too young, too violent, too afraid of anything more powerful than themselves. If we revealed what we are, they would see us as a threat to be destroyed or a prize to be captured. There is no middle ground. So we hide. So we protect. The empty chair in the assembly hall is not a symbol of isolation. It is a promise. As long as that chair remains empty, humanity is watching. We are preventing wars. We are discouraging conquests. We are giving the galaxy time to grow, to mature, to become something better than they are." Nicole thought about the aliens she had studied over the years. The Veloci with their 4 eyes and scaled skin. The Krix warriors with their brutal culture of conquest. The delicate Telosi and the ancient Kralith. So different from humans and from each other, yet all capable of beauty and cruelty in equal measure. "Will they ever be ready?" she asked. Andrew smiled, and in his eyes she saw something that surprised her. Hope. That is the question we have been asking for 500 years. And every year, the answer gets a little closer to yes. He stood and walked toward the door, leaving Nicole alone with the weight of human history. She understood now why the archives existed. Not to hide shame, but to protect hope. Somewhere in the future, perhaps centuries from now, the galaxy would be ready for the truth. The chair would be filled. Humanity would step out of the shadows and take its place among the stars. Until then, they would watch and wait and protect from a distance. It was the greatest act of love that no one would ever know. Supreme Commander Thrak of the Krix hegemony had conquered 30 star systems in his lifetime. He had led armies that numbered in the millions. He had destroyed species that refused to submit to Krix rule and enslaved those that surrendered. In all the galaxy, there was no warrior more feared, no leader more ruthless. And he was tired of being afraid of an empty chair. The fear of Earth had spread through galactic civilization like a disease. Every species whispered about the mysterious humans who watched from the shadows. Every leader hesitated before making war, wondering if this would be the action that finally drew human attention. The entire galaxy was paralyzed by terror of beings that no one had seen in centuries. Thrak believed it was all a lie, a story invented by the weak to justify their cowardice. He had studied every report about humanity, every fragment of evidence, every rumor and legend. He had concluded that the humans were simply a clever species that had mastered the art of deception. Their technology was advanced, certainly, but not impossibly so. Their power was exaggerated. Their reputation was built on tricks and illusions. He intended to prove it. Ambassador Kethvorin was in the assembly hall when Thrak made his announcement. The old Veloci diplomat had spent the years since his encounter with the Earth Files in quiet contemplation. He no longer sought answers. He no longer asked questions. He simply watched and waited and wondered. "We cower before shadows," Thrak declared, his armored form rising from his platform. "We leave a seat empty because of rumors and fragments of data. I say it is time to end this charade." The assembly fell silent. Even the speaker, a being of pure light from a dimension humans had never visited, seemed to dim with concern. "What do you propose?" The speaker asked. "I have assembled a fleet of 300 warships, the finest vessels in Crick space, crewed by the best warriors in the galaxy. We will travel to the Sol system. We will demand that humanity either join the assembly or explain their refusal. No more mystery. No more fear." Kethvorin felt his heart sink. He wanted to stand up and warn Thrak, to tell him what he had learned about the beings who watched from the darkness. But he knew it would do no good. The Crick's commander was too proud, too certain of his own strength. The debate lasted for hours. Many delegates warned against the expedition. They cited ancient prohibitions and classified reports and the simple wisdom of leaving dangerous things alone. But Thrak was unmoved. "Anyone who wishes to witness history may join my fleet," he said finally. "We depart in one standard cycle." 47 delegates chose to accompany him. Most were from species that shared the Crick's belief in strength above all else. They gathered their ships and joined the fleet, eager to see the legendary humans humbled. Kethvorin watched them go. He did not join the expedition. He did not want to see what would happen when they arrived. The journey to the Sol system took 6 days. Maya Brooks watched them come. She stood in the command center of Station Prometheus, surrounded by displays showing every ship in the Crick's fleet. Their weapons, their shields, their communication systems. She knew more about those vessels than the beings who crewed them. "Director Morrison is requesting instructions," Heaven said. "Standard protocol would be to disable their ships and send them home." Maya considered this. Standard protocol had worked for centuries. A quiet demonstration of power, a warning message, and the intruders retreated in fear. Simple, clean, effective. But Thrak was different. He had not come seeking answers. He had come seeking a fight. If they simply disabled his fleet and sent him home, he would claim it was a trick. He would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. The fear would begin to fade, and other species would follow his example. They needed to do something that would never be forgotten. "Show them everything," Maya said. Kevin stared at her. "Everything? Are you sure?" "Everything." The Crick's fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Their sensors immediately began scanning the area, searching for signs of the legendary human civilization. They found 1 star, 8 planets, various moons and asteroids. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. Then the shadow appeared. It started at the edge of their sensor range, a region of space where stars should have been visible but were not. The shadow grew larger, spreading across the sky like spilled ink. And within that darkness, lights began to appear. Not stars, ships. The Crick sensor officer would later describe what he saw in his official report. He counted until his instruments could no longer process the numbers. The final count exceeded 10 million vessels, and the computers insisted there were more beyond their ability to detect. The ships were not like anything in galactic records. They were not designed for war or trade or exploration. They were something else entirely, something the Cricks could not understand. They had been waiting in the darkness. They had been waiting for a very long time. Supreme Commander Thrak demanded communication. He shouted threats into the void, challenging the humans to show themselves, to face him in honorable combat. His voice grew increasingly desperate as the scale of what surrounded him became clear. Finally, a human voice answered. "Welcome to Sol. You wish to see us. Now you have. What are these ships?" Thrak demanded. "What are you?" "We are humanity. These vessels are what we built while your ancestors were learning to make fire." The voice was calm, patient, without anger or threat. "You came to test our strength. Consider the test complete. The human ships did not attack. They did not need to. Their presence alone was enough to convey a simple truth. Any conflict with Earth would not be a war. It would be an extinction event. The entire military might of the Crick's hegemony would not be enough to destroy a single one of those vessels." Thrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his finest warriors, and felt something he had never experienced before: true fear. Complete and absolute terror at the realization of how small he was, how insignificant his conquests had been, how meaningless his entire civilization appeared in the face of this power. The fleet retreated in silence. They did not speak to each other during the 6-day journey home. When they finally reached the assembly hall, Supreme Commander Thrak resigned his position without explanation. He retired to a distant colony and never spoke publicly again. The 47 delegates who had witnessed the encounter were similarly changed. Some became advocates for peace, dedicating their lives to preventing the conflicts they had once celebrated. Others withdrew from politics entirely. A few simply disappeared, unable to live with what they had seen. But they all carried the same message. Earth's power was not exaggerated. The rumors had actually understated the truth. Humanity was watching, and they would always be watching, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The empty chair remained empty, and now everyone truly understood why. 100 years had passed since the Crick's expedition, and Ambassador Kethvorin was dying. He lay in a medical chamber on his homeworld, his body finally giving way to the weight of centuries. His 4 eyes had grown dim. His scaled skin had lost all its shine. The machines around him hummed softly, keeping him comfortable as his life slowly faded away. His family surrounded him, along with colleagues and friends who had traveled from across the galaxy to pay their respects. He had served the Assembly for over 150 years. Longer than any diplomat in history. He had witnessed wars and peace treaties, first contacts and extinctions, triumphs and tragedies beyond counting. Now, at the end of all things, his thoughts kept returning to that empty chair. The door to his chamber opened, and a figure entered that made everyone freeze in terror. She was human, the first most of them had ever seen in person. She was tall, with dark hair streaked with gray, and eyes that held a strange mixture of warmth and ancient sadness. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had never known true fear. The family members fled. The colleagues and friends scrambled for the exits. Within moments, the chamber was empty except for Kethvorin and his visitor. Maya Brooks sat beside his bed. She had aged in the century since she had sent him that image of a handprint over his world. Her hair had gone silver, and her face had lined with the weight of years. But her eyes remained the same, sharp and knowing and somehow kind. "Ambassador Kethvarin," she said, "I have come to answer your questions." He stared at her with failing eyes. 100 years of fear and wonder and confusion rose up inside him. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you hide? Why the fear? Why the empty chair?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. 3,000 years ago, humanity discovered that we were not alone in the universe. We detected your signals. We mapped your civilizations. We learned your languages and studied your cultures. We watched you from the shadows, and we prepared for the day when we would reveal ourselves. But that day never came. No, because we saw what you were. Maya met his eyes without flinching. "We saw the wars, Ambassador. The conquests. The extinctions. We watched species destroy each other over resources, over territory, over simple differences in appearance. We saw cruelty that shocked us and violence that sickened us." Kethvarin felt shame wash over him. He knew the history of the galaxy. The empires built on bones. The civilizations erased because they were different. The endless cycle of war and suffering that had defined interstellar existence since the first species reached the stars. "You could have helped us," he said weakly. "Could we?" Maya shook her head. "Imagine what would have happened if we had revealed ourselves. A species with technology beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Power beyond anything you could comprehend. What would you have done?" Kethvarin knew the answer. They would have tried to steal that technology. They would have formed alliances against the newcomers, or tried to manipulate them for advantage. They would have done what every species did when confronted with something new and powerful. They would have started a war. "You would have destroyed yourselves trying to take what we had," Maya said softly. "Or we would have been forced to destroy you in self-defense. Either way, it would have ended in death. So you chose to hide. We chose to protect." Maya leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The empty chair is not a symbol of our absence, Ambassador. It is a promise. As long as that chair remains empty, humanity is watching. We prevent wars that would kill billions. We discourage conquests that would end civilizations. We give the galaxy time to grow and mature and become something better." Kethvarin thought about the centuries since the Krix expedition. The wars that had not been fought. The species that had not been conquered. The peace that had slowly, gradually spread across known space as every leader remembered what waited in the darkness of soul. "And when will the chair be filled?" he asked. Maya smiled, and in that smile Kethvarin saw something unexpected. Hope, bright and shining and absolutely genuine. "When you no longer need us to keep the peace. When the threat of our power is replaced by genuine understanding. When the assembly can look at the empty chair, not with fear, but with anticipation." She reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and surprisingly gentle. "We are waiting for you, Ambassador. All of you. We have been waiting for 3,000 years, and we will wait 3,000 more if necessary." "Why?" Tears were running down his face now, a response he had not experienced in centuries. "Why do you care what happens to us?" "Because we were like you once." Maya's voice was soft. "Long ago, we were violent and afraid, and certain that the universe owed us something. We made mistakes that nearly destroyed us. And then we grew. We learned. We became something better." She squeezed his hand gently. "You can too. Every species can. That is what we believe. That is why we watch. That is why the chair remains empty." Kethvarin understood now, truly understood. Humanity was not hiding from the galaxy out of contempt or superiority or fear. They were not monsters lurking in the darkness, waiting to destroy. They were guardians. They were teachers. They were waiting for their brothers and sisters among the stars to grow up, to put aside their petty conflicts, to reach for something greater than themselves. And when that day came, when the galaxy was finally ready, Earth would take its seat among them. Not as conquerors, not as masters, as family. "Thank you," Kethvorin whispered. "Thank you for telling me." Maya stood and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the dying ambassador with eyes that held the weight of millennia. "Tell the others," she said. "Not the fear, the hope. That is what we truly want them to understand." She was gone before he could respond, vanishing as silently as she had appeared. Kethvorin died 3 hours later, surrounded by the family and friends who had cautiously returned after the human departed. His final words were recorded and transmitted across the galaxy, becoming the most famous statement in assembly history. "The chair is not empty. It is waiting. And so should we." In the years that followed, something began to change. The fear did not disappear, but it was joined by something else. Curiosity, wonder, a strange and growing hope that perhaps one day the waiting would end. Species that had fought for millennia began to seek peace. Civilizations that had competed now cooperated. The empty chair remained in its place of honor, but the looks it received were different now. Less terror, more anticipation. And in the darkness between galaxies, humanity watched and waited and smiled. The chair would be filled someday. They were certain of it. They just had to be patient.